Hi, I'm Andrew Berry and welcome to At the Benches YouTube channel. We're coming back round to the technique of soldering again. The reason being, I think soldering, and I've always said this, is a technique that has basic, simple rules. And if you can follow those basic, simple rules, your soldering will be spot on and perfect every single time. But even though you may have the most cleanest piece of metal, the tightest joint, you fluxed the piece, there can be a problem with your torch. And I have been on Facebook on quite a few of the jewellery and metalsmithing groups that are on Facebook. And this particular type of problem always comes up. And I'm always doing my best to help via Facebook and these metalsmithing jewellery groups on there. And sometimes people don't understand, and it's no fault of their own. It's just they haven't been shown the correct way, or they haven't been taught the correct way. I've got a couple of simple handheld torches in front of me, a small little butane one like this and one that is a little bit bigger. Now, people sometimes try and heat up a piece that is too large for the torch that they're using, or they put the flame on the piece expecting the flame to melt the solder and to heat up the metal for the solder to flow, and that is not always the case. The little torch that we've got here, as I said, this is little handheld butane ones, like a creme brulee one that you can buy even in a cooking shop, is great. It's a fantastic torch to begin with, to get the grips, to become comfortable with holding a torch, but it's had a limited use. You can do rings with it, you can solder ring shanks with it, you can perhaps heat up a piece of metal that's around about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch in sort of size. But anything bigger than that, this torch is just not powerful enough, and you would need a larger torch. Again, a handheld torch like this one. And you can see the difference in the two that we've got here. The flame on this one is going to be bigger. There's going to be more heat coming out of a bigger flame, and this would be ideal for soldering bangles, strips of metal, because it has the capacity, it has a larger flame and the heat to heat up that metal. So another little problem that you've also got is that knowing where to put the flame on a particular piece that you're soldering. And remember, it is not the flame of the torch that will solder the piece. It is the heat of the metal getting to the correct temperature for that solder to flow. Solder will always melt before the metal has heated up hot enough for the solder to flow onto the metal. The misconception is you heat up the piece, the flame is on the piece, the solder is the smallest piece. The ring is larger. The solder, because its mass is smaller than the ring or whatever you're soldering, will always melt first. People then try and keep heating the piece and the metal does not get to the correct temperature, either because they've got the wrong size torch or the position of the flame is completely wrong. It is the metal, the temperature, the heat of the metal that will enable the solder to flow, not purely using the flame of the torch. A little tip I'm just going to quickly show you now is knowing where that sweet spot is of a flame that is the hottest part. You can't say, well, 3 inches from the tip is the hottest part, 1 inch from the tip, from the nozzle is the hottest part, because all torches are different. The flame that comes out will be all different lengths depending upon what type of torch you're using. These are butane torches. A propane torch may be completely different. The nozzles may be bigger, they may be smaller. But let me show you a way for you to see where that sweet spot is. And I'm going to use a piece of charcoal, a charcoal block here, or even a soldering block like this one as well. I'm going to leave the lights quite bright. Ideally, when you come to solder, you should always try and dim the lights, because then you get a true indication of the color of the metal. Perhaps if you're annealing, for instance, you have such a bright light, you may be overheating the metal. When it comes to soldering, you can't really have a dark area because you really need to see what you've got to be doing. But I'm going to show you the correct placement of a flame on the block or on a piece of metal to ensure that that is the best heat that you're going to get. Too close, it's not going to get hot enough. Flame too far away, it's not going to get hot enough either, but there is a sweet spot. So I'm going to keep the lights nice and bright, because then you can see the effect on the block and the charcoal block itself when we move the flame in and out. We're going to start off with the small little flame first of all. We can turn on the torch, and we've got the flame. It's very, very hard to see in this light, admittedly. You dim the lights, you can really see, but then you can't have a dim light when you're soldering. So let me just quickly show you what I mean. Look at the block. The block will turn orange when it is hot. When it goes black, it's not that hot and it's gone quite cold. So I'm going to bring the flame down onto the block, and you will see what happens and see which part of the block heats up. If I bring the flame down, you can see the flame quite nicely. So at the moment, the block is not doing hardly anything at all. There's a little bit of color change there. But as you bring the flame closer, you can see how quick and how hot that block is becoming. So back here, yeah, the block's getting hot, but the best place for that flame is when you come right down to here. That is the hottest part of the flame. Now look what happens when I push the flame towards the block. Now remember, this is the cone of the flame, as you can see. The best place for placement of that is right on the tip, right there, right where my brush starts to melt. But look what happens when I push the flame nearer. You'll see. Okay, so that's the best place. Go closer and you can see a black hole coming in the middle. Obviously, around that black hole is very, very hot. But you bring the flame too close and you're trying to solder something, and what you're trying to solder is inside that black hole. That is where there is no flame. That is inside the cone. That little area where it's black is not really heating up an awful lot. But you bring that flame back a bit, you can see how the black circle is there. Bring that back and that is your sweet spot there. Further back, you can see how the orange glow gets less. You bring it close, 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 close. Sweet. That is a sweet spot. Any closer, and that isn't. You can also do it exactly the same on a soldering block as we've got here. Exactly the same principle. You can come along, it'll get nice and hot at that sweet spot. You push it closer, you get that black dot in the middle. So the best area to solder with, the position of that torch is right where that sweet spot is, which is just there. Let's try with the big torch. It's exactly the same principle with this big torch. It's going to be a bit noisier. You can see the flame on this is a lot larger, but the principle is exactly the same. Yeah, that is going to get very hot. As you can see, we've got a bit of a color change going on. You take the flame down and it quickly gets very, very hot. It glows brighter right in the middle. Take it further, you've got that black dot in the middle. So if you're trying to heat up a piece of metal, and your piece of metal and your joint is inside where that black dot is, it is not going to get hot enough. Take the flame back until that black dot disappears. That is a sweet spot. Take it further away. Yeah, that's going to get hot. But if you want to quickly solder and get the most heat from the flame, take it down to the tip that we've got there, and bring that down here, and that is the tip right there. You can see the light blue cone comes across right to there. Let me show you on the soldering block exactly the same thing. flame back here, great. That gives a nice general amount of heat. And if you're warming a piece up, perhaps a bangle, you can use that. Just take it around and around to get some general heat. But you want to concentrate that heat. Take the flame down to that sweet spot, just by there. Any further, black dot. Put it back, sweet spot. Further back, still hot, but that is the hottest part of the flame. Just before you see that dot. And remember, you can overheat solder, so never put the flame directly on the solder to start off with. Remember, you don't even have to put the flame on the solder at all. Providing the solder is touching the surface of the metal, it's the metal that gets the temperature, and it should be the metal that melts the solder, not the flame. Sure, the flame may ball up the solder, but do not concentrate the flame on that solder. You will burn the properties away and it will not flow as it should. So remember, sweet spot of the flame, put that onto the metal itself, not necessarily the solder, and it's the metal coming up to the correct temperature that will melt the solder. So I hope that is giving you some indication on the nice sweet spot of the metal and the best placement of putting that flame on your piece to get that piece just the right temperature to solder. My name is Andrew Berry. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, if you like these quick hints and tips on our YouTube channel, please, I'd love you to subscribe, give me the thumbs up, and also leave a comment down below. I'd love to read them. But in the meantime, my name is Andrew Berry for At The Bench's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye. Incurs a lot of expense. So that is why I like the borax cone. Plus, if you happen to tip it over on your bench, it doesn't spill everywhere. Borax doesn't evaporate. It doesn't go off. It just sits by the side of your bench, quietly, waiting patiently to be used.